computer.
Recording in progress.
Welcome to an episode of the From the Pure Land podcast. I'm Mel Pine, and as usual, you can go to melpine.substack.com, melpine.substack.com, to see blog posts. I do them almost daily, and I try to do one podcast a week. This is also a video podcast, so some of you can read it on Substack and not listen to the video, listen to the sound or watch the video. Some of you will get just the sound, and some of you will get the video. So I hope we don't confuse anybody. I had mentioned in the blog that Cortland Dahl, the co-founder and leader of Tergar International, which is the organization, the worldwide organization that spreads Mingyur Rinpoche's teachings and meditation practices. And it's an organization that, Mingyur Rinpoche is my current teacher, primary teacher, and I have a lot of confidence, faith, hope for that organization to be a leading force as Buddhism comes west. Anyway, so his schedule is so busy that it's going to be months before he'll be able to be my guest. Beth Korczynski is the director of philanthropy for Tergar International. She's also a person, from my observation, who understands the ins and outs of the various programs. She's got a top level understanding of the ins and outs of the various programs. So she has agreed to do this interview now. And don't worry, she's not going to ask you for money, and at least until she gets you involved in some of the programs. And then you can expect her to ask you for money. With that, Beth, do you have anything to add to my introduction?
Well, thanks so much, Mel. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for settling for me. And also, there is kind of another reason why I have a good knowledge of Tergar in and out, top to bottom. It's because I've been here so long too. That's the other thing. I started at Tergar when we were just a handful of people and we all did everything, like vice president of everything kind of a situation. So yeah. So I've, watched the organization grow as well from the inside, which has been very exciting. So yeah.
Yeah, that has been, your knowledge has been obvious to me when I do virtual retreats with Mingyur Rinpoche, and often there are subsequent other sessions during the day when someone will take questions. And often Beth may facilitate that with the expert, but I've noticed a lot of times Beth has the organizational answers that sometimes the expert doesn't. But anyway, as I mentioned earlier to Beth, I was really impressed, and I'm not going to have the right language for this. Beth, you can, give it the names that you prefer, but there was an Ask Me Anything type webcast with Beth and Cortland Dahl, in which they really answered everything. And that to me is unique, not just remarkable, but truly unique among religious organizations of any kind, but especially Eastern-based Buddhist organizations, which are generally very top-down, very, we don't have to answer to anybody. And there's a reason for that tradition. But I have noticed sometimes as it translates to the United States, I have seen things I consider abuses. So, Beth, I'd like you to talk a little bit about that session, what led to it, and anything you can say about the culture of transparency in Tergar.
Thanks so much, Mel. That is a great topic. I think that there are a few different places because of interdependence. There are a few different places where, this comes forth, from which this comes forth. And the big one is probably Mingyur Rinpoche himself. I mean, a lot of the personality of Tergar International is, we take our lead from our teacher, Mingyur Rinpoche. And, he's quite open and quite direct about a lot of things. I mean, obviously, as you say, there are certain things, depending on the teachings or the progression of the path, that maybe aren't open to everyone or are kept more closely guarded. But he'll tell you that, and he'll tell you why, So I think that a lot of this comes from, our teacher is such an open person. Then, of course, there's the idea that we're at our heart, we're a community, and, communities are based on trust, and trust is based on reciprocal action, like kind of proving that you're trustworthy. And so I think that for that reason, it's really important for us to show our community that we're also a part of, how much we respect them, and therefore, kind of being open about things is a way of showing that. And then I think finally, actually, I've done a lot of different varied things in my long career. But when I started doing the fundraising for Tergar International, I went like all in on becoming a fundraiser and got my professional certification and everything. And as part of that, I mean, you really come to understand that the fundraising profession as a whole actually does promote transparency as, the best way to really deal with your, to treat your supporters and your, constituents. Maybe not everybody does a great job of it, but, it is one of the sort of tenets of I think there's like a code of conduct or something that, for the fundraisers through our associations and things like that. So during and how this all came about was that, prior to the pandemic, we always had our in-person events only. We weren't having any online events at all at that time. And during our in-person events, the main place where people might make an offering or a donation would be through the basket that would be put out at blessing lines. And so a lot of times for many attendees, the blessing line or the ceremony, the empowerment was something new for them. And so we always had a Q&A session in the morning before that kind of an event. And those Q&A sessions would actually be open to sort of any question that would pop up. And so what we found is that, a lot of people had a lot of questions, and it was sort of just prior to a point in time in which we were going to maybe ask them to open up their wallets a little bit, right? So during the pandemic, when we moved online, I said, this is what's kind of missing from this event is we don't have this opportunity to have that back and forth, that Q&A. So I believe it was so 2020 was the first year we did everything online. And then in 2021, we actually decided to implement this. And I can't remember what we called the sessions at first. They weren't called Ask Us Anything. It was called something else. I don't know, maybe just Q&A. But we actually had one as a small group breakout for every single retreat that we had that year. I went back and looked, and we had them in the 2 time zones, in the Americas and in Europe. We had 13 of these sessions in that single year. And then we decided that's maybe too much. And also it was only limited to the people attending the retreats at that time. And we thought it should be open to everyone. So that's when we started implementing an annual Ask Us Anything event. But when we say anything, the one thing we do restrict is no practice questions, or, because there's lots and lots of opportunities throughout the year for those kinds of things. So questions about our organization and our plans and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, it was all good. And, my own bias, or let me just say, I've been burned a little bit by some US based, or 1 or 2 US based Buddhist organizations that have grown very rapidly and seem to be money machines. There are enormous amounts of money flowing with no accountability or explanation of where that money is going to go. And in the session that I attended, I think you and Cortland, I think you especially talked about the proportion of revenue that comes from fees for seminars and stuff, retreats, and the proportion that goes to support people who can't afford it.
Yeah, I think it's important to, to accept the reality that in the modern world, it costs money to do things. And, I think people know that, there's all kinds of cloud hosting. You're probably learning this yourself with your new endeavor, all kinds of hosting fees and, various other, services and programs and things like that. And so, yeah, it does cost money to do things. And if you know Mingyur Rinpoche, you also know that his vision is really vast. Uh, so he wants to go big, and if you're gonna do that, I think you have to, you have to do it well. You have to do it with good, business practices and you know what I mean? It's can't just be sort of haphazard, right? And so, I mean, I think that it's important that we have income that comes from our operations. It helps to keep us sustainable. But at the same time, we also recognize that, there's a lot of different reasons why at any given moment, somebody could use a little extra help, and we're based in the US. A lot of the students are in countries where the purchasing power parity is not equal. And, so yeah, so anytime anyone asks us, basically we're happy to accommodate them. So about 6 in 10 of program participants get some form of reduced price or free thing. Not for everything. Sometimes they do it for something, but not something else. So, it kind of evens out.
Yeah, I think, my own, I don't want to sound too gushy about my teacher, but for anybody who doesn't know Mingyur Rinpoche's story, you have a guy who grew up in what's the equivalent of Tibetan Buddhist royalty, in being the son of a highly respected teacher, the Tolku, the reincarnation of other highly respected teacher, the inheritor of a bunch of monasteries to run, more or less. And after living with attendants who handled money and bought train tickets and stuff, he decided for a retreat rather than going to a monastery. He spent his life in monasteries. He went out on the street to live with no money and nobody knowing who he was. And he lived for 4.5 years that way, including a near-death experience, like a month or so into the process. And then he comes back to his primary monastery after an earthquake has greatly destroyed it, and decides, oh, we're going to rebuild this place. And not only that, we're going to make a worldwide organization that makes awareness, meditation, not necessarily the theology, but with the theology, we're going to ease the suffering of the world. We're going to manifest our bodhicitta. And so I think, when Beth refers to the ambition, it really, in my opinion, is honestly a manifestation of bodhicitta. This is not greed.
Absolutely. Mingyur Rinpoche, he talks a lot about bodhicitta in action or bodhisattva in action. And one of the most beautiful things everything he says is beautiful, but I won't forget, now we have this new program that, maybe we can talk about at some point, called Anytime, Anywhere meditation, which we used to call pre-Joy of Living. And when Rinpoche was first expressing to us his idea about this course that he was calling the essence of the joy of living at that point in time, he described like a kind of a pyramid where, that showed the different people on and stages of, his program, his path. And so he was saying, of course, you have the joy of living, which is open to everyone. And so maybe more people might find that accessible, and not as many, might want to go on to, for example, the path of liberation. But when he was talking about anytime, anywhere meditation, his idea was that a huge number of people would have access and go through this program. And I remember him saying, most of them will not become, Buddhists. Many of them will not even become meditators, but what they learn and what they gain, they'll never lose. And so that will help to reduce their suffering even a little bit. And that just opened my heart. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, that's my philosophy. Anything I can do to reduce suffering is bodhicitta.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be making Buddhists. It doesn't have to be making Buddhas or
Mm-hmm.
making enlightened people from a Buddhist perspective. But it does have to do with helping people reduce their personally enhanced suffering.
Yeah. My customized suffering.
So that's a good point to make the transition to, let me show this. This is the Tergar.org website. And it's just Tergar.org. You can get there. And if you click on the Tergar path and then the first one, what is the path? It describes the basic programs of the path and leads to this diagram, which I think is kind of nifty. And the Well, I'll let Beth talk more, or ask Beth to talk more about the progression. But this graph begins with any time, anywhere meditation, which she was just talking about. So why don't you? And that is, as I understand it, a beginner, who knows nothing about meditation, would be perfectly comfortable there. Would you kind of take it from there?
Yeah, I think it's actually a little more than that. It's kind of like a sampling of teachings in the Joy of Living. So it really does cover the essence of what Mingyur Rinpoche's teachings are. So more than it being it's not an introduction to meditation. It's not a how to meditate, although those things are in it. It's really more of an introduction to the qualities of your own mind, awareness, compassion, and wisdom. So, in the past, so let me take a step back and say when Mingyur Rinpoche first started teaching in the West, he was teaching a more traditional, what he called at that time, the 4 levels of Mahamudra. So Mahamudra 1, 2, 3, and 4. And um, a lot of that incorporated the teachings that are in the Joy of Living. So the Joy of Living is, we refer to it as a secular path, but that means there's just no overt Buddhism in it, but it's all Buddha's teachings, right? And so it's really the foundation, and Rinpoche says, go back again and again, kind of teachings. So that was in the 4-part Mahamudra course. And then it kind of wasn't working for people. They were like, there were some disconnects, and Rinpoche realized we need something else before this. So he and Cortland Dahl actually got together and devised the curriculum for the Joy of Living program on a train ride to Paris once or something like that in 2008 and so then and started putting together the series and the book and all the teachings and everything. And they thought this was going to be a lot more accessible. People will be able to start there. And, then when they get to the path of liberation, if they get to path of liberation, it's, so much more accessible now, right? Because that Mahamudra level 1 was like already, what is all this, right? So then as it turns out, the Joy of Living is accessible but it's not the most accessible because it takes 18 months to get through it. There's a lot of homework. So then Rinpoche said, well, we need something else, for people to just get a flavor of what we're even talking about so that they can decide whether or not this sounds like something they want to embark on. Because it's a pretty big leap to ask somebody to sign up for 18 months worth of study right from the get-go. So, anytime, anywhere meditation is a 5-module course. There's an overview, then 1 module each on awareness, compassion, and wisdom, which are the 3 core pillars of Mingyur Rinpoche's teaching. And then the 5th module brings it all back together. The thing that makes anytime, anywhere meditation different and really unique in what's being provided in a lot of ways is the emphasis on specific daily life application. There are actually guided meditations that are meant to be done while you're engaged in something else. For example, driving to work or doing dishes or some light household chores or, things like that. And then you kind of build up your muscle of making that practice actually accessible anytime, anywhere, which is the promise we're all told from the beginning. But when the rubber meets the road, like most of us find it really difficult to even recall practice anytime, so that's kind of the neat thing about it. And then it really sets it up for the joy of living. Then if people find this anytime, anywhere meditation compelling, they're much more likely to, find the joy of living as accessible as we had intended it to be in the first place.
Not to sidetrack you too much, but there's also now the Cortland Dahl Meditators Guide to Buddhism. How does that fit into this anyway?
Absolutely, that fits into this. So when Mingyur Rinpoche was rethinking the structure and we had Joy of Living and we had Path of Liberation, he said, we do great at these, but where we're not doing so great is at the connector points, the just before the Joy of Living, which is how Anytime Anywhere came out, and the after the end of, when you're kind of finished the 4 levels of Path of Liberation, actually the 5 levels, and that in between stage between Joy of Living and Path of Liberation, right? So as we said, Joy of Living is basically presented in a secular way. We're not hiding the fact that we're Buddhist, but there's not, a lot of overtly Buddhist content. And if you want to continue after you finish the 3 levels, then what we have available is the Path of Liberation, which is the Buddhist teachings in the Buddhist path. And, as a matter of fact, there are prerequisites now. You start getting into that. If you want to take it on and follow through, you need to get refuge, you need to have an empowerment, et cetera, et cetera. That's a pretty big leap in and of itself, right? From this, secular program to now all of a sudden, the first thing you need to do is a ceremony. So we've had for years what we call the Exploring Buddhism series, which is available through our Vajrayana online courses, and they were meant to give people a feel for what Buddhism is and that kind of thing. But again, it wasn't really as, I don't know, like practical, like, well, what does this really mean to me? So that's where Cortland's new book, which I have a copy of, so I'm here somewhere on my desk. It's underneath a pile of papers. But is to really help bring that alive a little bit more for people, like what it really means, what we're really talking about. So that is, once you finish the Joy of Living, you're a meditator now, or maybe you've been a meditator in a variety of traditions, but and you want to learn a little bit more about Buddhism, and in particular Tibetan style of Vajrayana Buddhism, that's where Cortland's book comes in. So now we're offering that as sort of an interim program for people who finish the Joy of Living and aren't really sure what they might want to do afterward.
Let me hop in a little bit and just do a quick roadmap, in part from my own experience and in part just to make sure we're not, we're throwing all these terms around and it can be very confusing. The various programs and terms. First of all, the word Mahamudra is an interesting concept because it's not easy to explain what it is. It's an approach. It's not a school of Buddhism. It's an approach to teaching and understanding the nature of mind and finding your own Buddha nature.
Mm-hmm.
And there's Dzogchen is another one, and I've had experience with both, but they're, I tell people not to worry too much about those terms, worry about having a teacher you like.
Yeah.
But before any time anywhere, or when I started to get involved with Tergar, there was Joy of Living, which has these three sections, and then there were prerequisites for doing Path of Liberation. Now, I strongly advise people, if you've got a bit of experience in Buddhism, start with Joy of Living, but I'd had 30 years and, easily met all the requirements. So I jumped into Path of Liberation 1, which I did remotely. And then in person in St. Paul, I did 1 and 2. Now, Path of Liberation 2 is the only portion of this path, at least that I'm aware of, that does require you to be in person with Mingyur Rinpoche or qualified Rinpoche who can give you the White Tara empowerment, which you're going to need later on in Path of Liberation 5. But 3 and 4 kind of take you through the nature of mind.
Yeah, each level is, so in the Mahamudra tradition, which is a key practice in the Kagyu lineage of which Mingyur Rinpoche is a part, the nature of mind, the nature of your own mind teachings in Mahamudra have at the Vajrayana level especially have a fourfold pointing out instructions, and each level of the path of liberation, of the Tergar path of liberation, represents one of those pointing out instructions. Mingyur Rinpoche will tell you that the second one is the real pointing out instruction, which is really why you need to be in person for that one, because that is the one in instruction level where it's specifically meant to go, heartbeat to heartbeat, breath to breath kind of a thing. So you do need to receive the specific teachings that are in the Tergar tradition. So it isn't even just any empowerment or anything like that. And then it used to be that we always got the Vajrasattva empowerment at that retreat. And later on, we would get the White Tara empowerment in order to do level 5. But actually, because of the pandemic, Rinpoche changed the way he did that because of his compassion. So now, if you can attend just that one retreat in person, you get everything you need that has to be done in person for the entire path of liberation path. So it's a one-stop shop from that standpoint. Because in order to do the practices of path of liberation levels 1 through 4, you just need a Vajrayana empowerment. It could be anyone. You might even one you already had. So if you actually already had one, but you do need the specific White Tara empowerment in order to do Mingyur Rinpoche's specific White Tara practice. And you do need to get the pointing out instructions at that level directly from him in person. So there you go. But once you get through that, you got everything you need right in your back pocket. Just keep up with your practice, and and enlightenment is just around the corner.
Well, I'll tell you something, about my own. It's interesting what you said about Path of Liberation too. My wife's not home. She's on vacation in Mexico, so I can talk about her. Although she'll probably nah, she won't watch this. Um, but we did Path of Liberation 1 together remotely. And then I really wanted that empowerment. And as you know, Beth, we met in person. Beth and I met in person there in St. Paul when I did that retreat. That was 1 and 2. So I was kind of repeating 1 and taking 2, repeating 1 in person and taking 2. And I will add that I got a taste of Beth's compassion because my arrival there was a bit of a disaster. It was on a college campus, a fairly large campus, and I had one of those airline disasters that caused me to get there so late on the first day that I couldn't even get to the first day of the retreat, and went to a hotel because I couldn't find anywhere to check in and get a room, and showed up the next day, and Beth, and in this kind of mad. Oh, and I forgot to mention that when I take long trips, when I need airports and I'm going to be on a big campus, I use a motorized wheelchair because I have mobility problems. And Beth was one of the people that really helped me get situated. Anyway, back to level 2. There are certain experiences that I had in level 2. I had another outlook after the empowerment. It sort of changed something in me, or at least I felt changed afterwards. And I was talking to somebody and they said, "Oh, well, that's the empowerment." And I said, "Oh, yeah, you got a point." Because I felt changed. But aside from the change, I had certain experiential understandings. And I guess I'll avoid being too specific because I'm not a qualified teacher and I don't, do it with Rinpoche. But there were certain experiential understandings that I had of things that were intellectually understandable, but the way he led the meditations leading up to that empowerment, I experienced those things that we talk about, that we define, but I knew them experientially. And when I talk to my wife, she always says, "Well, I want to, I wish I felt, I really understood." And it's clear that she does have the intellectual understanding, and so she's hoping to be able to do Path of Liberation too, but it turns out she won't be able to do the one in Mexico that's coming up, and so we'll have to wait for another opportunity to do that. But I feel that having gone through to level 4 is great preparation for life, and I'm planning to do level 5 when it's available. But I think that's the basis of the nature of mind portion. So I just wanted to add that to what you said about you said Mingyur Rinpoche said number 2 is the pointing out, is the big pointing out, and it was for me.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think just from the standpoint of you know, the the people always ask, well, why can't you do it, over online? Why can't you do it online? And Rinpoche always talks about how the subtle energy and just, sort of that, that flow of energy that happens when people are actually in a room together and you can kind of feel it. That's the type of energy I think that's working when that, during that session, you know what I mean? Because I know, like, I know what you're talking about too. Like, there's something kind of sort of palpable about it, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to say something that's probably, I'm probably not supposed to talk like this, but we shouldn't be judging, levels of realization of people, but I can't imagine being in the presence of a more realized person than Rinpoche. And so I think there is something in him being present. I mean, even on Zoom, I feel that. But
Mhm.
in physical presence, and and you do the empowerment thing, and he taps you on the head with a vase, and and I think something happens. I can't. I don't have I can't tell you that it's scientifically valid, but I think there really is something to that.
Yeah. I mean, just think about, as a practice for yourself, like somebody that you see regularly on Zoom, and then the next time that you see them in person, like the feeling is different, isn't it? Right. So there, and I believe that we're working on things at a lot of levels, right? Not just the intellectual level, but almost, more importantly, maybe the feeling level, because understanding it intellectually but not feeling it is just dry, right? And it's not, it doesn't come to life for you. So yeah, I feel like that I don't want to underestimate the value of that, that feeling level. Now, on the other hand, there's lots of aspects of what you like, as you say, just sometimes people like it better that they're watching the retreat on Zoom, because now they can see everything up close with Rinpoche instead of having to cram into one of the seats in the back, or and he's so skillful. He always just seems like he's talking directly to you, on those kinds of things. So I do believe, as you say, that a lot of it is transmitted online. And yeah, so I do believe that as well.
No, with that, I think that, I've written this a couple of times in blog posts, then that I don't think there is another organization where somebody who's not able to go to Asia and spend a couple of years in a monastery can go from anywhere on their path all the way through. I mean, if they want to go the Vajrayana path, I mean, they may not. They may want to end up with a different teacher in a different form of Buddhism. But if you do want to go the Vajrayana path, you can start from anywhere, and this takes you all the way. And it's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this.
Yeah. And before it sounds like we're winding up, but I want to tell you one other story, because you made the comment about, the joy of living, and what level of student is it for? And during the pandemic, a couple years into the pandemic, we started to get a new donation from somebody whose name I hadn't recognized. I often reach out and say, "Hey, I'd like to know how you got connected," and da da da. And the name on the donation was a Western name, but it turns out that this person is a lama, and is a retreat master at a 3-year retreat house, and they had to shut down during the pandemic. And so this person found themselves with a lot of free time on their hands and said, a friend recommended that they just check out Mingyur Rinpoche's Joy of Living online program. And their first reaction was, but that's for beginners. But, signed up anyway and told me they found it to be one of the most profound and simple teachings, just brings everything really back to its essence. And I've heard that so many times. If you've been meditating for years and years and years, you might consider like just checking out the Joy of Living, because it'll bring it right back to that, that core essence, for you. So yeah, so just wanted to add that in there because I'm putting a plug in that even if you have 30 years of practicing experience, there's always something you can pick up on.
Yeah, that was my choice at the time, but yes, I recognize that, and I would tell others the same thing. There's a lot of value in the Joy of Living program. Oh, there is something we haven't talked about. The app. What can you tell us about the status of the app?
Oh gosh, that's a tough one actually. So we are working on a new app for the Joy of Living, and it would contain the Anytime Anywhere meditation course as well. So the target for this app is people, kind of who don't know anything about Tergar for sure, and maybe have tried some other meditation app but didn't find that it offered like a clear enough path for, well, what do you do next, where do you end up, so that's what we're trying to go after. So we started to work on an app, and we've had a lot of technical issues with the quality of some of the functions, that some of the things that we consider to be important aspects of it. And then we had some testing done with people who were chosen because they had zero connection to Tergar, had never ever heard of Mingyur Rinpoche, and we didn't get like the most positive responses back from that. So we're kind of continually at the drawing board and trying to work on, like, we don't, when you're going to release an app into a space like, just the general Apple app store, if you get some bad reviews up front because things aren't working right or people don't get it, like, you kind of lost your shot. So we really want to make sure that we have something, awesome when we release it. So we're just going to be taking a little bit more time for that. However, in the meantime, I will say that if you are a Vajrayana Online subscriber, there is now a Vajrayana Online app that just appeared out of spontaneous accomplishment, because the platform that we use for that course has an option that you can kind of take all the content and just make it into an app. So not the full Vajrayana Online isn't available there, just the part that's already on our new learning platform. But if you are a Vajrayana Online subscriber, you can find it in the App Store by just searching for Vajrayana Online. So yeah, and you sign in with your regular Tergar ID and it's right there. So that one, it's funny. We did not expect to have a Vajrayana Online app before we had a Joy of Living app, but that's the way it worked out.
Yeah, we should. And just to explain, Vajrayana Online is a subscription-based program that you sign up for. I think you can do what, like 2 weeks free or 2 weeks free
Yeah, it's
trial or
probably
something.
10 days or something like
10 days
that.
or
Yeah.
something. There is a free trial period, but if you look for Vajrayana Online, it's sort of a separate website, but you can find it, and it there is so much that it offers that it's a little overwhelming with all that's available. But if you really want a broad education in not just Vajrayana, but Buddhism in general, with some good Vajrayana courses as well. Give it a try.
And most of it is content that's open to everyone. There's only a few things that are restricted. So yeah, the vast majority of the content anyone can access.
Yeah, meaning you don't have to have done a certain course to get to the
Right,
They don't
exactly.
have prerequisite.
You don't, yeah,
Most of it
exactly.
is without prerequisites.
Most of it is without prerequisites. Exactly.
So, anything else you want to add, Beth?
No, I'm really pleased that you've invited me, and I'm happy to have had the chance to chat with you and with the people, the listeners. So thank you so much for that. We have a lot of excellent stuff in the works that we're continuing to develop. I mean, we didn't even start to talk about our meditation teacher program or anything like that too. So yeah, I invite people to check out tergar.org. If you have any questions, you can just send me an email. It's beth@tergar.org. Pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I'll add one thing about the meditation teacher program because of it. I mean, a question I get a lot is how the hell do I find a local teacher?
Mm.
And the meditation teacher, the training program trains, qualifies people to teach anytime, anywhere meditation.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a great starting point, and it's a possibility. I'm mentioning it as a possibility for people to find a teacher,
Mm-hmm.
because there are these people now who have been trained.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we have a website. I'll have to share the link with you later, but we have a website that lists the people who are certified teachers now, because if you wanted to invite someone to come to your community center or to your, club or office or small group of friends or whatever, and offer this anytime, anywhere meditation course, that would be a way of kind of getting people going, on meditating.
Well, thank you again, and I will ring the bell to introduce the end, and I invite everybody to just kind of take a breath now. And listen as the sound fades.